Hello, we're going to look at Chapter 2.2, Qualitative Data, and exactly making graphs for qualitative data. So let's talk about what qualitative data is again. Remember, qualitative data is data that is in categories, and it usually has names or some kind of ordinal value. So let's look at an example of what we can do with qualitative data. The first type of graph we can make is called a pie chart, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a pie chart with the following data describing the distribution of housing types for students in a statistics class. Calculate the size of each wedge in the pie chart to the nearest whole degree. So here we have housing types, we have types of housing and number of students. We have apartments, dorms, houses, sorority and fraternity houses. So we have 20 that live in apartments, 15 that live in dorms, 9 that live in houses, and 5 that live in sorority and fraternity houses. Okay, so to find the angles, what we're going to do first is do the relative frequency. So we knew 20 over 49 was the relative frequency for the apartment. So then you do 20 over 49 times 360. Why 360? Because there's 360 degrees in a circle, and a pie chart is a circle. So we know that the apartments, the central angle measure is 147 degrees, dorm is 110 degrees, house 66 degrees, and fraternity house is 37 degrees. Okay. So when you do that for the angle, this is what you get. We use technology nowadays to do this for us. You can make pie graphs in Excel, you can make them in Minitab, you can make them in all sorts of things. And if you see here, they converted the relative frequencies to percentages. So it says for apartment, it's 41%. Because remember, 20 over 49 is 41%. So the green is apartment, the yellow is sorority fraternity house, the purple is just for the regular house, and the reddish pink is dorm. The next type of graph we can use for qualitative data is something called a bar graph. Again, here's the same data that we looked at, and now we just made a bar graph. Note, along the x-axis is the categories: apartment, dorms, house, and sorority and fraternity house. Make sure you put a title on that x-axis. We put types of housing. Along your y-axis is number of students. And we actually did it as a frequency, so you can go 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. And across the top is housing types for students in a statistics class. You can create a Pareto chart, which basically is a different type of bar graph. So look, we have new data. We had fundraising results for 5 different classes, and we're trying to see the number of fundraisers with the items sold. So let's make a look, and we see Miss Boyd's class sold 200, which was the most. The least amount sold was Miss Meredith's class with 143. So what you're going to do is, because the data is nominal, that means that it's going by names, it's not ordinal, you can make a Pareto chart. So you can arrange it from largest to smallest, which I talked about before. Miss Boyd's class had the most fundraiser items sold, and Miss Meredith had the least. So when you graph it, again, this is a bar graph. We just flip the x and y axes. Because here, now on the y-axis, we have each name of the class for the teacher: Miss Boyd's, Mr. Carter's, Mr. Smith's, Miss Willard's, and Miss Meredith. And along the bottom, we have the frequency. These are called, you can have a bar graph that goes up and down, or you can have one that goes side to side. It doesn't matter. But notice, the least amount is at the bottom for the sold, and the greatest amount is at the top. So a Pareto chart can put them from greatest to smallest, or smallest to greatest. Okay, you can create a side-by-side graph using 2 different types of groupings. So here, if I had two different statistics class, I could say, okay, from sample A is class, my 9:30 class, and sample B is my 1 o'clock class. So all I'm going to do then is I'm going to compare how many lived in apartments to each other, how many lived in dorms, how many lived in houses, and how many lived in sorority fraternities. Again, my x-axis is type of housing, and my y-axis is number of students. So I could ask questions based on this. Which class had the highest number of people living in dorms? Well, that would be sample B. Which class had the least number of people living in sorority fraternity houses? And that would be A. Another type of graph is a stacked bar graph. And what we do then is we go ahead and put sample A, we put that in as one set of bars. And then on top of those samples, we put sample B. What this does is it can show us easily which housing group do most students live in. Well, most students live in the dorm. The least amount of students live in the sorority fraternity houses. This is a quick way to see the total number of people living in a certain type of housing. These are also found a lot in journal articles because it gives you the overall feel for the data. Okay. So that was qualitative data. In the next video, I'll do quantitative. I hope it helps. Take care.